Please join me.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. This talk, as you can see, is called Motivating the Unmotivated. And I must tell you how it started. It started because I was invited to go to Colombia, which is a beautiful country. And please would I go and give a talk in Colombia? And my answer was, of course, yes, because it's a lovely place full of lovely people. And they said, but we want you to give a talk. We've got a title for you. And I said, well, what is the title? And they said, well, Motivating the Unmotivated. and I don't know about you. Do you like talking about motivation? I said, could I talk about something else? because motivation is very difficult. What can you say about motivation? It's a good thing. It's really good if people are motivated, and it's better if they're motivated than they're not motivated. What can you say about motivation? It's really difficult. You could give a lecture on motivation, couldn't you? A lecture, you could read the psychology. You know about motivation. You get a goal, you come up with a goal which gives you a perceived goal, and that sets on a desire to achieve the goal, which provokes some kind of action, and then and different motivations, different learner personality. You could give a psycholinguistics lecture. Trouble is, I'm not a psycholinguist. And I just got really nervous. What are you going to do? So, what do you do when you don't know what to talk about?
You talk what you know.
What?
You talk about what you know.
You talk about what you know. There's another thing you do always, of course, when you don't know what to talk about. That's what you do. Because you know the joke about Google, don't you? Because Google is now, I mean, you don't have to know anything anymore. And you don't have to teach children any knowledge anymore. All you have to teach them to do is how to use Google. And then they can find out anything they want. Every bit of Austrian history they ever want. You just go to Google. It's all there. It's on Google. And you know about Google, the really dangerous thing about Google is if by any chance you type your name into Google and you get no hits, maybe you don't exist. So anyway, so I typed into Google, motivating the unmotivated. Here it came. It was 1,004 motivated, unmotivated. Oh, 1,004, you have to read them all. You have to read them all. And it's you know, look at it, it's millions of them for motivating the unmotivated. And the problem about the internet is some of the stuff on the internet is gold. And some of the stuff on the internet is what's the opposite of gold?
Rubbish.
Yeah, rubbish, just absolute rubbish, or worse. I'll tell you some other time about a site called The Teachers. But anyway, so what do you do? But anyway, I started looking at some of them to see what I could come up with, and oh yes, one person I came across, he said, yes, motivation is not all cracked whips and tossed pieces of fish. What do you think that means? What do you think that means? Motivation is not all crack whips, discipline and
gifts. Yeah.
Discipline and gifts. Do you have the thing? Do you have the thing in Austrian German about the stick and the carrot? Yeah. It's not all sticks and carrots. It's not all. I suppose this comes from it's a circus, isn't it? Yes. I suppose the elephant stands on two legs and pieces of fish. Elephants? Do elephants eat? Seals, that's right, elephants. Anyway, so, and you get all sorts of weird stuff on the internet. And this was from a man called Louis Schmeier, who's a history teacher. And he said he came from the University of Valdosta. Now, I don't know about you, but I get lots of emails every day from people I've never heard of before. And sometimes they're offering you new loans. Sometimes they're offering you bigger mortgages, and then the other thing they offer you quite often is you can get a doctorate for pay $20 and you can get a doctorate. And so I thought the University of Valdosta, it's going to be one of those. No? Have you ever heard of the University of Valdosta?
No.
Well, I googled that as well, and guess what? There's the state of Georgia in the USA. Look, and there's Dalton, Rome, Athens, Atlanta, Georgia, Macon, Columbus, America's Savannah, the Okefenokee Swamp, and Valdosta. So Valdosta does exist. And I kind of like that. Motivation isn't just all about rewards and punishments. So what the hell is it all about? Well, one of the things I came up with was, this is a site I came up, and this is from the University of Hawaii, and it just said, this is someone who said, it seems clear that students are not necessarily unmotivated or unwilling learners. And that's the key, really, isn't it? Because whenever people talk about motivation, they say, oh, the problem with my students is they're not motivated. But it's not true. Actually, most students are mostly motivated at the beginning. Isn't that true? I mean, kids are kids. 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, are they motivated or unmotivated mostly? I mean, unless things at home are really, really terrible and their family's absolute rubbish and everything's going bad. Most kids have got curiosity. Most kids have life in them, and most kids are motivated. When you walk in at the beginning of the school year, you're the new teacher. Do the kids go, or do they look at you like that? What's she like? What's he like? Wonder what this is going to be like. Most kids are motivated most of the time. It's not a problem. And by the way, you can motivate kids anytime you want, can't you? Have you got a best lesson? Your favourite lesson. Have you got a best lesson which always works? Have you got one of those?
Games.
Oh God, you're all looking very depressed.
Hangman.
Hangman or a game. Everyone's got something that works. Everyone. You can. Jesus, your teachers, your professional teachers, everyone can motivate students. That's what we do. It's in our blood. It's in our genes. We're genetically, we can all motivate students. The problem isn't motivating students. The problem isn't that at all. The problem is not how to motivate students on the first day. Because the first day you hit them with the best stuff you've got and they go, wow, what a teacher. The problem is how to motivate students on the 162nd day. The problem is how to motivate students when it's dark outside and there's rain and they're miserable and stuff like that. The problem isn't motivating. The problem is how to sustain motivation. And it suddenly occurred to me that the talk I could give, and which I'm going to give now, shouldn't really be about motivating the unmotivated. Because kids aren't that unmotivated. The problem is, how do you keep motivation going over a period of a term, 2 terms, 3 terms? How do you keep the stuff going? How do you get the kids to come in the morning and instead of going, oh, here he is again, going, ah. Well, I reckon in the end, and it's partly because they begin with A, but I reckon there are about 5, there are about 5 things which all have a part in sustaining students' motivation, it seems to me. First one, activity. Activity, why do activities sustain motivation? What's the most motivating activity you've got in your teacher's pocket, teacher's handbag? What's the most motivating activity? You said hangman, no? Hangman, yeah. The metaphorical kind, obviously, not doing it with the children. What's the most motivating activity you've got?
Acting out dialogues.
Acting out dialogues. Kids love acting out dialogues. What's the most motivating activity you've got?
Acting out dialogues. Yes.
Acting out dialogues. That's great. We need more than that. More variety. Most motivating activity you've got? Singing. Kids love singing on a good day. Kids love singing. On a bad day, movement. Kids moving around. They love moving around. What's the best activity? The most motivating activity? Vocabulary King. Vocabulary King. What a terrific activity. What's the best activity you've got? What? Sports. Yes. All right, now move the tables back. This is the goal. Yeah. So clearly one of the ways, sorry?
Hands-on, for example, like cooking with them in English, or with the biscuits here now at Christmas, making biscuits with them, hands-on.
Hands-on stuff, experience, especially for the kinesthetic learners, that kind of thing. Hands-on experience, actually doing things, making biscuits, that kind of thing. So clearly activity is part of it, but as we'll discuss in a minute, that can't be the whole answer. There must be more to it. Maybe it's got something to do with agency. You familiar with this term, agency? Comes from the social sciences, and agency basically says you cannot start taking decisions and be involved in decision making unless you're prepared to take some kind of responsibility for your thoughts, unless you have some kind of agency for what you do. What's the agent of a passive sentence? What's the agent of a passive sentence? The thing that
is being done to.
the doer. The agent is the doer. The thing that does, and it seems to me that students are much more motivated if they are the people that do than if it's always the teacher that does. And that when the students have some responsibility for what's going on, maybe that's why acting out is such a powerful activity, because the students are doing. They're not just sitting receiving, they're not just sitting learning, passive verb. They're learning, active verb. Sorry, my passives and actives are getting mixed up, but you know what I mean. I think part of it is to do with affect. What's affect all about? Feelings. Nothing more than... It's feelings, isn't it? Affect is all about feelings, how they feel. And we know about that. I think motivation, sustaining motivation, has got a lot to do with adaptation. Who needs to adapt? And when? Teachers do. When?
When they notice the mood of the kids is turning around, they have to change.
Like, if you look at teachers at the beginning of their career, especially teachers in training, the one thing they find most difficult to do is when something unexpected happens,
To change.
they go, oh, duh. And the worst thing, you have to feel so sorry for this, but one of the things I do is to examine teachers. I go around and watch them for 1, 2 or 3 examination schemes, and they know that I'm watching them and writing little comments about if they're a good teacher. And the worst thing that happens is in the middle of a plan, and it's a really complex plan, they really plan it, they're in the middle of the plan, something expected happens, and they go...
Freak out.
Total, because they think, what do? Do I follow the plan? Or do I respond to the unexpected? There's this guy at the back of the class watching me. It's really, really difficult. Adaptation. And the last thing I want to talk about is attitude. Whose attitude? There's a terrible thing that teacher trainers do, isn't there? Which is that you ask people questions. And I know the answer, but you don't. Anyway, I want to talk about the teacher's attitude.
Laugh is a rehearsal subject. And he has to involve the students by showing them how he or she feels about the subject. If I'm bored by the topic I'm talking about,
the students don't stand a chance, or rather you don't stand a chance, because the students are going to say, she doesn't care.
Yeah.
If she doesn't care, well, I don't care. Yeah. No, attitude for me is the attitude of the teacher. Or rather, what I want to talk about is, I don't really care what the teacher's attitude actually is. I don't really care if the teacher's head is full of murderous thoughts. What I care about is what the students think the teacher's attitude is. And if the students think that the teacher's head is full of murderous thoughts, you're in trouble. If the students think that the teacher is basically bored out of their wits, then you've got a trouble. But if the students, even if you are bored out of your wits, if the students think that you're really on the game and you're really, really excited and it's really going well, that's what it's all about. So let's start with this. Here's an activity. This is for older kids. Actually, it's an activity for you, but it's just to make a sort of demonstration. Imagine that you have all got the job of being judges in a photographic competition. Yeah. And the theme of this year's competition, dear judges, the theme is men. And we're going to look at some photographs of men, and you have to judge the winning entry, okay? Now, so what the students have to decide, what my students have to decide, this is clearly sort of level 4 or 5. What the students have to decide is what should the winning photograph be like? Tell me, what should the winning photographs? It's photographs of men, remember? That's all, that's just, the whole competition, it just says men. What should the winning photograph be like? It should be...
A man with muscles.
Hmm?
A man with muscles.
A man with muscles. I like a woman who knows her mind. That's a man with muscles. What should the winning photograph be like?
Suntanned.
Suntanned. Yes. Okay. Do you have anyone in particular in mind? Come on, help me out. What should the winning photograph... What?
Bearded.
Bearded. Oh, stop it. Oh, please. We agree with that, don't we? Absolutely right. Yes. You've got a little one. Anyway, but come on, what should a winning photograph, what should it be like? Someone who's smiling. What should a winning photograph be like?
Not blurry.
Not blurry. In other words, it should be technically competent, clear. It's not just, I mean, you should actually get some window into the character of the person. You should learn something about the person. What should the winning photograph be like?
A nice setting.
A nice setting, yes, some kind of, quite a dramatic setting. What should the winning photograph be like? Original, something you haven't seen before, something that tells you something new about life. What should the winning photograph be like?
humorous.
Humorous, maybe a bit of humor, or if not humor, a bit of, I don't know, tragedy or something to provoke you, something to move you, somebody with fantastic muscles and because yeah, all right. So the idea is you get the students to, in groups, to try and come up with, say, 4 or 5 criteria for the winning photograph. What does the teacher do while the students are in groups? What does the teacher do? You go from group to group, and what do you do when you go to the group? You help them, you motivate them, you provoke them, if they get stuck, you give them ideas. If they're saying something that's just plain wrong, you kind of help them out a little bit. You might want to give them special words to help them, like you were talking about a technical, sort of the way it's you might sort of give them words to help them, like contrast or focus, or just to help them in that kind of thing. And then you say, okay, here we are, here are the 4 photographs. Are you ready? Here's photograph number 1. Here's photograph number 2. Here's photograph number 3. And here's photograph number 4. Okay? Now, if you were real students, I would have said to you that you can't choose the one you like best. You have to choose the one that satisfies the criteria you've chosen. But in your case, just quickly talk to the person next to you. Which one are you going to choose? Which is the best photo? Talk to the person next to you. Talk to the person below you. Okay, thank you very much. Let's just see. How many people chose that one? How many people? Why? It's natural. It's got a tremendous. Is that what you said?
Symmetry.
Oh, there's a symmetry about it. There's a wonderful symmetry about it, isn't there? The composition of the photograph is really wonderful, isn't it? Why did you choose that one?
Perfect setting.
Perfect. The setting's perfect. It's a black and white photo, but isn't it powerful as a black and white photo? Why did you choose that one? Because there's a tremendous sense of interaction, isn't there? And amazingly, for a still photograph.
And it remembers the kids of the vacation or time with the father.
It's just, I love, I mean, I don't want to say it for you, but I just love, I love the fact of he's a very man, and he probably satisfies some of your criteria, I think. What? But he doesn't have a beard, so he's so he's not. Anyway, he's turned his head. But seriously, he's kind of clearly. Well, actually, he looks rather, doesn't he? But so he's very man, and yet he's being very warm, and it's a very warm and human picture. It's a fabulous photo. Absolutely love it. What about this one? Anyone choose that one? Because?
Relaxing.
It's relaxing. Can you hear the music?
Yes.
I can sort of hear what he's playing. Some people just think this photograph is, but you can hear it. And are you going to give him any money? You give him some money as you walk past? I love, you were talking about composition before, about the first photograph. You talked about composition. I think the composition of that one's rather, I love the angle people play saxophones at. I mean, some people play it like this, but I love the, what is he, so, and it's very nice. But, okay, not the most popular photograph in the pack. What about this one? Because?
It's dramatic.
It's incredibly dramatic. Have you ever seen cliff diving?
Yeah, fantastic.
Some of you know. Do you know cliff diving? You know when you see the Olympics diving? I mean, Olympics diving is nothing. They just go, that's it. And you can only watch it if it's slowed down with slow motion. But cliff divers, look how high he is. I mean, it's like he's on another planet. And they go. If there's a piece of plastic floating on the water, you know what happens? They die. Because the velocity, that's a bit of an exaggeration, they break their leg, okay. But it's more dramatic if you say they die. Anyway, I love this photo also because I love the fact that he's about to risk his life and all he's got is a tiny little bit of red material. And that, he's either incredibly brave or really, really stupid. And the other thing, I love the fact that it's actually quite an ambiguous picture because it's sort of... Anyway, and this one? Anyone choose this one? Because? It's peaceful, functional, caring. And the composition, isn't the composition lovely actually, isn't it? And the thing, what I love is this little kid here. Anyway, so there you are. That's a photographic competition, and then you get the students to talk to you about why they chose the photographs, what their reasons were, and things like that. And while they talk to you, what do you do? What does the teacher do while they're giving you reasons why they chose the photograph? What do you do? Do you just listen, or what do you do? You repeat it. You often reformulate it. Instead of correcting them, no, you probably just gently reformulate some of the things they said a little, if they were a bit incorrect, that kind of thing. And then you do some kind of summing up at the end, and it's the most perfect activity in the world. And it always works. Except sometimes it doesn't.
When there's full moon.
When it's a full moon. Or it's funny you should say that, but the younger the children, or when it's very windy or something like that. The really bizarre thing about the best activities in the world, I think this is a good activity. I think it provokes students to speak using English. I think it's got a goal they can perceive. I think it's got an outcome. I think it really works as an activity. I like it too. It's great, you know, and I love the photographs as well. It's a fantastic, it almost always works. But there's always that one case which, for reasons which are really difficult to work out sometimes, it just doesn't work. So when people say, how do you sustain motivation? One of the answers is by giving students good activities. But what we know beyond peradventure is that isn't the answer. It's only part of the answer. Because it turns out that even good activities on the wrong day can just fall flat on their face. And you know, the thing, and you walk into class with enthusiasm, and after 10 minutes, you want to die. Or become a taxi driver or something, I don't know. Just, and so,
You get cranky.
what?
You get cranky.
You get a bit cranky. No, you don't. You're too professional to get cranky. Some time ago, so the activities are part of the answer, but they can't be the whole answer. Some time ago, I had a period of doubt, psychological doubt, about my judgment about teaching. Because as I told you, I go and watch teachers and examine them. And I had a sort of crisis of confidence in myself. Because I was finding it difficult to judge whether teachers should pass or not. Because you just never... And I didn't know what to do about it. And the only thing I could think of doing was to get a tape recorder, to get a tape recorder and just go round and ask anyone I met, what makes a good teacher? What makes a good teacher? And I was interested in what people's answer would be immediately. And if someone asked you, what makes a good teacher? You'd say a good teacher is? Flexible. A good teacher is? Witty. A good teacher is? Patient. A good teacher is? Motivating. A good teacher is? Knowledgeable. Knowledgeable. A good teacher is knowledgeable. I interviewed about 200 or 300 people, and I interviewed teachers and teacher trainers, and I interviewed students of English as a foreign language at language schools in the city of Cambridge in Britain, where I live, and then I went and interviewed a bunch of 10 and 11-year-olds in a secondary school just down the road. And one of the girls said, "Oh, that's easy. So a good teacher is someone who doesn't always wear the same old boring suits and ties." And there's always one girl like that, isn't there? You go, "Oh yeah, I know your sort." Although, as we'll see in a minute, interestingly, I think her comment was my instant response to her was just to go, "Ha ha." Though I think probably she was saying something rather more profound than I thought she was. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But what the kids said, not the teachers, what the kids said was things like, well, a good teacher is someone who asks the people who don't always put their hands up. And I know you know this because you teach in schools. You teach in schools your whole day. But the fact is there are some kids who sit at the back of the class and they never say anything. And they just sit there with this kind of on their face. And the problem is, that doesn't mean they don't want to be involved. It probably means they don't know how to be involved. Probably because they're shy or because there's a group of people in the class who are really frightening. And you know, you don't want to make a fool. I don't know what the reason is, but just because they don't always say me, me, me. Of course, what we do as teachers, if we're honest, is we love the me, me, me students because they're so much more fun. Because they didn't down the bounce. But actually, these guys who never say a word, they want to be involved too. And according to these kids, a good teacher is someone who asks the people who don't always put their hands up. A good teacher is someone who cares about their students and understands what they want. Do you care about your students? Yes. All of them? Equally? Every day? Yes, you do. Just say yes. There are cameras. just say yes. Just say. But the thing is, it's what I was saying about attitude before. I don't really care whether you care about your students or not. But what matters is that the students should think you care. I'm not trying to be cynical or anything else like that, but teaching is a job. I went to a talk, I was in Montreal in Canada, and someone was giving a talk about discipline in school, a subject we'll come to in a minute. And she said, you know, kids are so good at finding the one button to press which doesn't just question your competence as a teacher, but undermines your humanity, and just at that moment you think you're going to have a psychological collapse. And at that very moment, you just have to say to yourselves, remember, it's just a job. You know, and I think teachers who treat it as just a job are usually not that good, to be honest. But there's a point there, isn't there? Which is that whether you care or not, the students are going to be much more motivated on an ongoing basis if they think you care. Because one girl looked me straight in the eyes and she said, oh, well, a good teacher is... And I find that so powerful because, of course, she wasn't actually talking about... I mean, yeah, you know, if you say... I mean, my name's Jeremy, and the name Jeremy is... I have lots of mixed feelings about it because it's in Britain, it's a kind of... But it's still me, and I want you to know my name. Of course I want you to know my name, and I'm grown up. Well, there are views on that, but I'm a grown up. But when you're struggling for identity and stuff like that, teachers should know your names. And it's not really about the names, is it? It's about the idea, the student thinking that the teacher, when I ask you a question, I know how you operate, I know who you are, I know about you. And all of this is about affect, about students thinking that you care about them on an individual basis. And if students think you care, they're going to be more motivated than if they think you don't care. And by the way, I know that's obvious, but I'm sure this isn't in your schools, but I have been into schools where you can meet students. Sorry, I'll start again. Where you can meet teachers who aren't even very good actors. And the kids know they don't care. And the effect is absolutely amazing. The kids go to classes, of course they do, because that's what you do. It's an institution. You do what you're told. If the kids think you care, they're much more likely to be motivated on a long-term basis than they think you don't. But of course that's not enough, because you all know some teachers who are just the sweetest, nicest, kindest, caring people in the world, and you say to the children, you know, who have you got next? And they say, oh, we've got, oh, Miss So-and-so. And they say, well, oh, she's very nice, but, you know. And she's very nice, but she just, you know, she can't keep the class in control. Because the next thing, it seems to me, that matters is, well, oh God, this is so embarrassing. I do apologise about this, but there is a point. It's a picture of me, and it's a picture of me without a beard. So obviously not your type. No, this here's a picture of me. I just thought I'd tell you something about me. This is a picture of me in my garden in Cambridge. Well, I used to live in the house, so that was the garden I used to live in. I just moved recently, in case you're interested. And this is the garden I'm in. And let me tell you something about myself. Well, I like reading books, and I'm absolutely passionate about music, as it happens. And, you know, I love listening to music, and I play music. It's my real hobby, and I have a particular fondness for wine of a slightly coloured variety, and things like that. And that's all about me, and you really want to know about me, don't you?
Well,
well, they don't. And the thing is, it is possible that you want to know about me. It's possible, but frankly, who cares? Because there's a difference between me in a garden in Cambridge, glasses of wine, music, all that kind of stuff. There's a difference between me, Jeremy, and me as a teacher. And one of the things that people in training at the beginning of their careers seem to find most difficult is to make some kind of a distance between me in the kitchen and me in the classroom, or me with my friends in the bar and me in the classroom, or me skiing down a mountain and me in the classroom. Because actually it's not that easy at the beginning of a teaching career to try and make a difference between ourselves as professionals and ourselves as people. When I was at school, I went to one of those posh boarding schools, where, and I was about 13 or 14, and a teacher came into class one morning, and his name was Mr. Playfair. It really was Mr. Playfair. And he said, "Good morning, boys." Because I went to a boys' school, I was just... good morning, boys. He said, "Now, good morning, boys. Before I start today's lesson, I just want to tell you that, as you know, I have been engaged to Miss Dunstan, the school secretary. But I must tell you now that that engagement is no longer in force." And what did we do to this poor man? We just went, who gives a, you know? Because I mean, by the way, looking back on it, I feel the guy must have been in some real turmoil, because, you know, you don't go and tell the kids about it, but he did. He felt and I said, a closed community, a bit like a convent, or no, that's girls, isn't it? What's the other one called? A monastery, that's right, a bit like a I suppose he had to tell us, but you just, who cares? We weren't interested in him as the ex-fiancé of Miss Dunstan. The thought of him doing that is horrible. Anyway, but we weren't interested in him like that. We were interested in him as a teacher, teaching us. And of course, kids are, I mean, of course they're interested in their teachers a little bit. You tell them facts about your life, but that's not the interesting bit. The interesting bit is all about me as a teacher. Now, I want to introduce you to this woman. Does anyone know who she is? Well, she's an ex-minister of the Labour government of Mr. Anthony... Oh, I can't even say his name, it's horrible. Anyway, but she's an ex-minister called Claire Short. She used to be the Minister for Overseas Development in the British government. And she's notable for two things. The first is, before we invaded Iraq, she said, if we decide to invade Iraq, I will resign. And we did, and she didn't. And I'll never forgive her for that, although she did resign 2 weeks later. But the effect of it was muted, whereas if she'd resigned before, together with another minister in our government, and who knows what might have been different. Anyway, the second thing you need to know about Claire Short is she is quite loved in Britain, because uniquely among British politicians, if you ask her a question, she gives you an answer. And when she was a minister in the government, this is the sort of thing that used to happen. She would come onto we have a programme on Radio 4 in Britain called the Today programme, which is where all the political agenda for the day is set. She would come onto the Today programme, and they'd interview her, and they'd say, "No, Miss Short, what's your opinion about the government's policy on, I don't know, on the health service?" And she'd say, "Well, I think it's rubbish." They go, "Oh." And then half an hour later, another government minister would come onto the radio and say, "Of course, when she said it was rubbish, what she meant to say was," you know, yeah. And she's contradictory and quite difficult, and has strong opinions and is not afraid to say them. And of course, I'm not talking about Austrian politicians; they're completely different. But in Britain, you know, okay. So the point about Claire Short is, they did this reality programme. Do you have Big Brother in Austria?
Yeah.
Yeah, but this wasn't exactly Big Brother, same kind of thing. They would get a politician and give them a different job for a week and take the cameras in. And what they did with Claire Short is they took her to a school for young teenagers to teach geography. And Claire Short hadn't been in a school since she had been at school. And Claire Short has very strong views about, you know, how people should be, and about politics and something like that. So the question was, could she be one of those or not? Well, I don't want to be rude, but this is essentially what happened. She walked in the first day, she said, "Good morning, children. My name's Claire Short." And the kids... And then she said, "Now today we're going to do geography. Now today we're going to learn about escarpments. You know, escarpments is really... No, could you stop talking a minute? No, just wait a minute. Wait. No, stop talking, okay? We're going to talk about... Please stop talking. We're going to talk about escarpments. And listen, if you talk all the time, you won't hear about escarpments, and it's really interesting." And the kids just talked and talked. "No, please, listen, honestly, what's the point of me doing all this work and preparing if you just go to... Please stop talking." And have you ever watched television like that, where you just want to hide behind the sofa? And it was just so the teacher, and the second day she went in, and it happened again. And the teacher said to her, "Look, Claire, And she said she'd have a video camera, you know, she'd have a camera like this in her room, and she'd talk to the video camera, and she said, you know, because I feel, you know, all children need is love and respect, you know, love and respect. And otherwise, you know, absolute chaos. The teachers at the school who were mentoring her said, Claire, look, you know, one of the problems is, if you're going to teach a bunch of difficult South London secondary kids, you need to kind of establish, you know, there are some things you need to do to control the class. You need to organize the way you control the class. And she went, what? No, you have to, you know, and then she'd talk to a video camera, she'd say, these teachers, they're just fascists. They're fascists. They want me to control the kids, they want me to be a dictator, they're just fascists. And so the next day she walked into the class and said, good morning, now today's class is about precipitation. I told you, please be quiet. No, please. Now, if you go on like that, I'm going to have to send you out of the room. No, be quiet, please. Absolute chaos. And by about Wednesday, the poor woman was completely desperate. I don't need to tell you about the fear that lurks in the breast of every teacher, which is, what the hell do you do if things get completely out of control? And she kept going to the camera, fascists, they're all fascists. But finally, now one of the things the teacher said is, look, Claire, one of the problems you have is at the beginning of the lesson, you just let the kids go into the class any way they want. And they make a huge noise as they go, and they sit wherever they want, and you're lost before you've started. And they said, look, what we do is we stand in the doorway of the class so only one child can come through at the same time. You know this stuff, but she didn't. Only one, and then you tell them where to sit. And at least when the class starts, they're sitting where you want, and the level of noise has died down. Fascists. But she was desperate. So on Thursday, what did she do? She stood at the door of the class. She said, come in, sit there, come in, sit there, come in, sit there, come in, sit there. And was her class a success?
Yes.
No. But it wasn't so much of a disaster. Because just for a bit, she had the kids, and just for a bit, she started... Okay, here's the deal. The next day, the newspapers who do the TV reviews said this was the biggest humiliation for a politician we've ever seen. And I think they were 100% wrong, because I thought it showed a triumph of how to mentor new teachers. That here was a woman who believed passionately at the beginning of the week that you don't go around controlling kids and dictating kids and making them do things. No, you don't do that. You just love them. And in only 3 days, she'd learnt the first essential rule of teaching, which is it doesn't matter how you feel. If you can't actually organize the class and make it work efficiently, you're nowhere. And by Thursday, she wasn't a good teacher, but she'd just begun to learn something about what it was like. Now, this is what I mean by attitude. I think that when you walk into the classroom, what the students need to be able, they want to see you walking into the classroom, and they may be feeling dreadful, but what they see walking into the classroom is not Claire. What they see walking into the classroom is a teacher. And it's the way we stand. And maybe the girl who said that thing about the same old boring suits and ties wasn't so stupid after all. Because it's not a comment about suits and ties. It's a comment about what you're like, what we're like when we walk into the classroom. And when you walk into the classroom, it's the way we stand. It's the way we operate. It's the way... Now, 9 months, 10 months in, when things are going well, they know you. They know us. But how do you... It's the way... It's what the students see the attitude of the teacher is. Ah, yes. Now then, I mentioned agency, and agency is all about this idea that students should have some responsibility for what goes on. That students should have some stake in the class. That, like the agent of a passive sentence, instead of the students always sitting and receiving, they should sometimes be doing, taking control. I don't mean taking control of the school curriculum, or taking control of the school hours, or taking control of the school canteen, or whatever else like that. But I mean they should have some responsibility for what's going on. A friend of mine called Mario Involucri, who some of you may have come across, he's certainly been to Austria many times, and is a quite inspirational figure in British English language teaching. He's kind of crazy, but he's crazy good, and comes up with extraordinary ideas. This isn't an extraordinary idea, it's just a little idea. But this is an example of agency in miniature. The idea is that students are going to work in groups talking to each other in English. It doesn't matter what the task is, a discussion, a fluency activity, anything else like that, in English. And all the students have 2 cards. One card has a teacher. I don't know quite why it looks like a 1950s teacher from Oxford University, but anyway, but it's a teacher. The other students have a teacher with a cross through them. Now, when we were talking before about the students deciding on criteria for photographs, do you remember? We said, what does the teacher do? And everyone said, you told me the teacher walks around, you help, you know, and you reformulate, you correct, and you provoke, you prompt, you said you prompt, that kind of thing. And you correct the students if they're making mistakes. But this time, the students put one of these cards on the chair next to them, on the table next to them. And if the card that's next to them is the picture of the teacher, what do you think it means? Dear teacher, if you walk past and you hear me making a mistake, even if I'm in the middle of saying the most incredibly original thing that's ever been said, please will you come and correct me? Yeah. But if on the contrary they put that card out, it means, dear teacher, if you walk past my group and you hear me making the worst mistake that you've ever heard any student make in English, don't correct me, I don't want to be corrected. And just for 2 minutes, the students make some of the decisions. Now, I don't know about you, but in teacher training in Britain, it's generally accepted that when students are doing a sort of grammar form-focused activity, we correct them. But when they're doing a fluency activity and talking, on the whole, we sort of listen and we collect data. And then when it's all up, are you familiar with this? And then when we act as kind of, what's the word? We act as sort of eavesdroppers, you know, like listening at the door. And you sort of, and then when it's all over, you say, I really enjoyed listening to your groups. You were so good. What a fantastic group. Oh, now, I heard 1 or 2 things here. I just thought I'd write them up and we can correct them. That's what you do, no? It's funny. My brother works at a school in the south of London. It's called the Wimbledon School of Languages. And he was worried about this. And there are about 220, 30 students in the school. And he gave all the students a questionnaire about when and how they like to be corrected, just out of interest. This is not science, this was just to inform him. And overwhelmingly, about 90% of them said, when we make a mistake, we want to be corrected at the very minute we make a mistake. It doesn't matter what we're doing. We want to be corrected at the very minute we make a mistake.
Were they being serious, applying?
They were being serious. Because they knew that what the teachers believed was that, on the contrary, you don't interrupt people in the middle of something. Now, the only reason for telling you that story, which is only one school, and who knows whether they were being serious or what, who knows, but all I'm saying is that actually students have opinions too. Students have methodological opinions too. And this little activity, which only lasts for the 2 or 3 minutes while they're doing a fluency activity, just gives them a little bit of choice. A little bit of stake, of power. They're the agents. I'm sure many of you do this kind of thing at the beginning of term. You make contracts with students. You discuss with them what's right and what's wrong and what the rules are going to be. And you know perfectly well that if the teacher says these are the rules of the class, the students may well obey them. But in the end, they're the teacher's rules. Whereas if you have a discussion and you get the students to say what the rules are, then when this one gets out of hand, because she does quite often, when this one gets out of hand, you say, hey, excuse me, but you said you thought this was a bad idea. And it's her rules that she's making a mess of, not mine. I must tell you, I hope I can tell you this story. I have a don't look so enthusiastic. One of my great friends and one of the methodologists I find most profoundly impressive in the methodology of English language teaching is a man called Scott Thornbury. And he's from New Zealand. But that's okay, I suppose. Anyway, but he's from New Zealand. And the thing is, some time ago, after his grandfather died, he found his grandfather's diaries. Why is that relevant to this discussion? Well, because his grandfather had been a primary teacher in the middle of nowhere in New Zealand, which is in the... Anyway, but so he'd been a primary teacher in the, just in a sort of field somewhere. I exaggerate, but it was in about the 1920s. And he kept a diary. And he went to school on the first day of teaching and met the headmaster. And the headmaster says, "You're getting class, you know, A2 or whatever it's called, XY or something. And I'm really sorry, but they are the worst class in the school. They're really badly behaved. And the only way you can keep that class in order," this is 1926, "the only way you can keep that class in order is to use the tawse." It's a Scottish word for the tawse. Now, it is amazing that you can go onto the internet, Google. You've got to be careful which websites you find, but you can find instruments. You can find instruments of torture like this for beating children, with lots of websites saying we need more of this. When was it abolished in Austria? It was abolished in England finally in state schools as recently as 1987. When was it abolished in Austria? Anyway, moving on. So this is the tawse. Now I've absolutely no idea of whether the one with 4, 2, 3, or none at all is the most painful. But what you know is if you get a 9 or 10-year-old kid to hold out their hand and you lash them with a piece of leather like that, it's unbelievably painful.
We went through that as children.
And some of us went through that kind of thing as children, and it's just anyway, and it hasn't affected us a bit, has it? And so this is the tawse. So the head teacher said to Scott's grandfather, "They're really, really bad class, and you know, the only way you can keep them in control is the tawse." Now, this is what the grandfather said in his notes. He said, "I really didn't like that idea." This is 1926. "I really didn't like that idea. I went into the class on the first day, and they were quiet because I was a new teacher, and I held up the tawse. I said, 'This is the tawse,' and you could feel the ripple through the class going, 'Yeah, we know, yeah.' And he said, 'This is what I want you to do. I want you to take this away and hide it, and don't tell me where you've hidden it. And if at some stage one of the children in the class behaves so badly that you think that he deserves the tawse, bring it to me and I will use it. But otherwise, I don't want to know where it is.' And they never brought him the tawse. And the class behaved much better than any teacher had ever had that class before. Now, I don't know how exaggerated that story is or anything, but as a story, it has huge kind of metaphorical resonance, doesn't it? That if you give the kids some agency, some responsibility for what they do, there's just a chance that they will remain more motivated than if it's always the teacher who says what's going to happen, what you're going to do, what's coming next. Do this, do that, behave, sit down, stand up, do this. If the students have some agency, there's a chance their motivation will be sustained over a longer period. One more thing, and then I'm going to stop, so if anyone wants to ask questions, you can, or if you just want to escape, you can do that as well. Although it doesn't... Anyway, but one more thing. Do you have... Is there a German equivalent for this idea of thinking outside the box? Blue sky thinking? Are you familiar with that expression? That's probably it. What does it mean? Thinking about alternatives. Yeah, thinking about alternatives. But of course, the outside the box idea is thinking not just alternatives, but thinking completely outside the normal thing. Just being incredibly creative as you come up with ideas. You know, when things happen. This is. We talked about this before. I think students are very badly affected. That's too strong. Are very badly affected when the teacher is in the middle of doing something. Something fantastic happens in the class. And as I said before about teachers in training, the teacher doesn't know what to do about it. And they just go ploughing on because they stay inside the box. That's the only way. I've got a very good example, which comes from a teacher training course in Barcelona in Spain, where a young man was learning how to be a teacher, not an EFL teacher. And he was doing this teaching practice being watched by the teacher trainer. So it's a scary moment. And he had been asked to do a reading text. This was teaching adults, not children. But the point is made. He was being asked to do a reading text from a course called Cutting Edge about identical twins, which kind of fascinate everyone, unless you are one, and then I've no idea whether you find it fascinating or not. But anyway, and a transcript was kept of what happened in this class. And it went like this. Good afternoon, class. And the students, good afternoon. And they said, the teacher said, is anyone here a twin? Anyone here a twin? And in the transcript it says, twin? Yes, a twin. She's on the stage. Twin. And no, is anyone here a twin? You know, like identical twins, same identical twins? Anything? A twin. He says, gemelos, twin. Gemelos, twin. Yeah, a twin. I'm a twin. And then suddenly Jorge says, hey, yo, I see, I a twin. My brother same. And the teacher says, wow, you're an identical twin? See, and all the other students go, joder, que no sabíamos. And they go, this you see, and the teacher says, you're a twin? An identical twin? See, yes, I'm a twin. That's fantastic. I mean, the chances of that are sort of 1 in 350 million, aren't they? Fantastic. It's really interesting. Right, turn to page 26 in your books. And you can excuse the teacher because they're in training, they haven't taught before, and they're being watched, and it's bloody difficult to do a reading text for the first time when you're being observed by a teacher who's told you how you should do a reading text. So all you're thinking about is step 1, step 2, step 3. And then a student says something, and you just, why did you laugh? You laughed because none of us would do that. Because what the students need to see is a teacher can adapt. Now, it's possible that Jorge, when people say, oh, do tell us, you know, if your brother hurts himself, do you feel it? Oh, if he has a girlfriend, do you feel it? I mean, maybe Jorge is sick of talking about what it's like to be an adult. I don't know. But you know that a magic moment has occurred in the class. A moment when any teacher with experience, which is most of you, any teacher with experience instantly knows that something has to change. You have to adapt to it. You have to move with it. You have to change what's going on. You have to be flexible, which is what you said hours ago. It could have saved me the whole talk. You have to be flexible. And if students see teachers who aren't flexible, I think they sort of think, you know, because, and by the way, it goes the other way as well, which is, you know, what do we do when things break down in class? Well, one thing to do is just to keep going, but it usually doesn't work. When you come across a language problem that you hadn't anticipated, for example, do you just go charging ahead? Or do you, on the contrary, you think, oops, and with the experience you go, I tell you, ooh, and you for 5 or 10 minutes you do something that was completely unplanned because you're adaptable, because you're flexible, and students need to see that. So in conclusion, because I know it's time to go. In conclusion, and there's a man back there who really wants me to go. In conclusion, but it's 5, but you've got 5 minutes. In conclusion then, I think, for me, when I was asked to give a talk called Motivating the Unmotivated, I don't think it's a question of unmotivated students. I think it's a question of how to sustain motivation in students, and I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's a mixture of giving them good activities. It's a mixture of making sure they feel good because they know you care. It's a mixture of having the kind of attitude that students see a professional teacher in front of them, not just Mr. Playfair. I think it's a matter of giving students some agency when you can. And finally, I think it's a matter of being adaptable in what happens, and I've overrun, and thank you very much for being here, and that's the end of my talk. Right. Thank you. Okay, now cheer up. Go away. Because there's a poor man you have to get out quick, because there's a man who wants to give a talk about spelling.